Good evening, everyone, and welcome to ICALA. My name is Alberto Keosian, and I am the Learning and Engagement Coordinator here at the museum. Tonight, we are thrilled to present a special POV tour led by the artist Rodrigo Valenzuela, who will be guiding us through Sandra Vásquez de la Hora's exhibition, The Awake Volcanoes. For those visiting the museum for the first time, our POV tour series invites remarkable artists and esteemed thinkers to lend their perspectives through generative tours of our current exhibitions. These tours offer expansive means of engaging with the work on view and allow us the opportunity to explore exhibitions at ICALA in richer and more layered ways. In your seats, you will find printed programs with additional information about tonight's program, as well as Rodrigo's bio. Rodrigo Valenzuela is widely recognized for his thought-provoking practice that examines themes of labor, identity, and the human experience. He is the recipient of numerous prestigious awards and is an associate professor and head of the photography department at UCLA. In tonight's program, Rodrigo will invite us into a broader context, drawing from the work of other artists as well as his own, before guiding us through the exhibition from his perspective. Following the tour, we'll open up the floor for discussion and Q&A. Thank you all for joining tonight and supporting ICALA. Please join me in welcoming Rodrigo Valenzuela.
Hi. All right, so please don't forget that this is like an artist version of this show, of The View, by I'm not a historian or a curator, so I don't have to like it. I love the show, and the work is very interesting. There is a lot of stuff I like, but I thought to tell you more about her work or how I can enter. I thought that it could be better if I make a presentation of what I'm thinking when I look at the work and how I'm reading the work. So it's sometimes because like when you don't like something, I mean, we live in this society that is so like partisan that like understanding something is equated with liking something. And it's so problematic, this idea when like, you know, we have critics in school or you go to the studios and the regular excuse for people is, oh, he didn't get the work. That's why he doesn't like it. Or he got it. He got the work. That means they like it, right? So it's very complicated because I understand a lot of things that I hate. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't understand a lot of things that I love. I love thinking about them. You know what I mean? So like that way, sometimes with work, and especially with this, I think thinking with the work becomes more important to me than thinking about the work. Like actually, I think the readings of the work is quite limiting. Mostly because I am not a big fan of when artists, mostly of certain generation, are so devoted to these kind of mystical qualities. Like personally, as a Latin American artist, I don't think we have superpowers or more in touch with the, you know, with mystical powers than anybody else, that, you know, some person without education. And I'm really suspicious when people with high level of education and high level of visibility are more in touch with sacred things than you. So I'm gonna try to break it down in way how those ideas come from. But I do recognize that her work is so deeply Chilean and belong to this like consciousness of Latin American production that is quite particular. So I'm gonna try to like guide you through it so you can figure out. So it's in Spanish, so for the people that don't speak Spanish, I will translate the first part, but this is very, very important. This is for a lot of the Chilean people. This is Vicente Huidobro, a Chilean poet that was part of the Surrealist movement. He was alive around, he was making these poems around like 1911. And he was the founder of this group called, this movement called Creationism, where she takes a lot of influence from there. I will show you more examples of creationism, but basically it's like pre-surrealist, pre-Dada poetry, right? So the first part of the, and this is something I really live by in my own practice, this part of the poetry that is the first part where let the birds to be a key that open 1,000 doors. A leaf falls, something is flying. You can see with the eyes closed, the soul of the listener is trembling. Invent new words with your words. The adjective, when doesn't give life, kills. And I think a lot about the preciseness. I mean, I try to be kind of like an efficient person and like efficient maker, and mostly not to be economic necessarily. But I think is that like kind of how to find the right adjectives to every single thing that you make, because the wrong adjectives, it can kill the thing that you're doing in the creation, in the creative act. I mean, a lot of the poetry that he wrote was in these shapes and objects, and you can see something I really like the display of the works that they have is this kind of pyramids and shapes that the work has that I think is quite interesting to break that narrative and the linearity that a lot of the time we can avoid having this upbringing that we all have, reading from left to right, from top to bottom. So when you create these kind of like clusters of work, allows you to not obey those and allows you to make connections more randomly, and the work is so singular that it really allows you to kind of build this alphabet of meaning, that where you can, like women, bird, and then you create these meanings for yourself. And I think being alone with those clusters is the part that I love the most about the show in some way. I mean, this is a sample of how he writes, and this is where creationism comes from a lot. Ya viene la golondrina, ya viene la golonfina, ya viene la golontrina, ya viene la goloncina, ya viene la golonchina, ya viene la colonclima, ya viene la colonrima, ya viene la colonrisa, la colonniña, la colongira, right? So he is part of imagination and thinking all the animals and all the shapes that they come once you're just kind of playing with sort of the etymological components of the words and kind of like flip and think and give yourself new possibilities, which is something that, again, you see it in Borges. I don't know if you guys have read the Babel's Library, or a lot of Borges poetry or like and novels have a lot to do with finding this one connection among everything, kind of thinking or writing about the ether, right? The one thing that, the nothing that joins everything in some way. Have you guys read the Aleph? Have anybody read the Aleph? The Aleph? It's incredible. It's a go tonight, and it's a 3-page short story. But in that poem, in that short story, Borges talks about this little pebble that you go inside this room, and you can see the whole universe. And when you look at it, you see your father, your mother, your grandfather, the history of the war. And that allows, it's two writers fighting over who can be the better writer, and one guy is like, gets really good and confess to the other one that is because he had access to this like Aleph, this pebble in the basement, right? But it is a very good kind of how you get to the molecular component of creativity that allows you to expand from there, and it's a very worth reading that everybody should do to think a lot of creativity. Another part of one thing I want to remark that the only two Nobel Prizes that Chile has is of poetry, Gabriela Mistral in 1945 and Pablo Neruda in 73. But he is my favorite, Nicanor Parra. He mostly wrote anti-poems and like kind of this like jokey thing. He was like by training physicist, and he taught at Brown. He has tons of PhDs on mathematics, and when I was a kid, he taught mathematics at my university. And this is anti-poems, how to look better and feel great. And he did all this. Also, he could, in the books, he could have pictures of stuff that he writes, and there were these graphic poems, that he called them in some way. The Discovery of America, Presidential Discord, What a Pity, is such a big beauty, or something like that. I'll Be Right Back, a Message in a Bottle, Ultimatum, or God is everywhere, or God is absolutely anywhere. So he was a big influence for me when I was growing up as a teenager. Like, and also he was kind of like a pop culture person. He was always in the news and kind of giving the opinion in TV shows, but also because he come from this family, Nicanor Parra, that his family's very big part of the culture is almost like the Kennedys of Chile. Like his sister Violeta Parra is a very beautiful singer, but also textile artist and painter, poet that collaborated or was part of the same generation, maybe a little older than Cecilia Vicuña and after Sandra. So you can trace kind of gestures and feelings and references from Parra to Vicuña to Sandra. You know, that is. You can see in the back some of her paintings and embroiderments and paintings. And this is where like I'm gonna switch a little bit, because this is her painting. I really love when I was younger too, the way that she painted and the way that she because here you can make a direct reference to connections to the gestures you see in her work. I really love the way that Sandra uses the negative space and how much air and room there is for the figures to live in the space, right? The physical aspects of the work that Sandra has make me think a lot about a lot of different artists, and I will try to show you a lot of these artists that I think when I look at her work, not to compare them for who does it better or worse, it's just actually just to create this kind of like, what is apophenia? It's this like, apophenia is this like mental disease that makes you find connection in unwanted places. It's what conspiracy theory people has, right? And like that is the only kind of way I live in the art. I'm like kind of letting things fit into places. So because you're not just mostly when you're an artist, like you go to places trying to come find solutions for your own problems, and then you don't find a way to put them in places where they really belong. That sometimes they not help you to your work, but makes this puzzle in your head of how certain aesthetics come to fruition or like flourish, right? So, for example, you see a lot of these things in Roberto Mata. Roberto Mata is this Chilean poet, a Chilean writer and Chilean painter that, just like Sandra, just like most Chilean people, have to leave Chile to make an income with this thing. He also was part of the surrealist movement by the very end, and you guys are probably more familiar. There is a big, beautiful painting of Roberto Mata at Moca that is incredible. LACMA. In LACMA. It's super, super good. Also, he's the father of Gordon Matta Clark, the guy that make holes in buildings. Yeah. You know, and the shapes, things that you also see in a lot of the gestures that the way that depicting figures is a little more evil. I mean, again, they're more masculine, so it makes sense, but there's a translation on the way that moving the brush stroke or the hand and the line is also very present in Sandra's work. I read, these are pictures of mine, by the way, so like cell phone photos, but also something that is very interesting is the way that Sandra works, and the way that the pieces are in singular sheets of paper and kind of assembled together to create a larger scale. That is something that Wilfredo Lamb also did. This Chinese Cuban painter that also immigrated to France and made most of his career in France. Also part of the Surrealist movement by the end. And what is amazing is all these paintings, they were all made in craft paper. So when you look at all the paintings close, they are like made in sheets of paper on crafts. So again, so much of this attitude has to do with the kind of like the precarity of being an immigrant and always thinking that, I don't think there is one single, I mean, okay, 99%, I have no intentions to ever go back to Chile, but like most immigrants are constantly thinking, when I get back, I will be, you know, so like the idea of like, can I be ready to go all the time? And I think these paintings that they can be made on paper and folded and ship around, I think is very important for the consciousness of the work, and kind of you can feel the immediacy and you can feel kind of like that they're both a record but also disposable in a way that like they don't have this like, I've been spending 3 months making it, or I've been spending a year making it and I don't know how to solve it, or I can resolve this figure. You don't feel those doubts in Sandra's work, and also you don't feel it in Wilfredo Lamb's paintings or drawings. Again, it was mind-blowing to be seeing closer. The choice at MoMA right now, so if you happen to go to New York, please see it. It's really, really incredible. This is Maria Martins. Is relatively unknown sculptor. I really love her work. You see, I mean, in the paintings behind the gesture, she was an artist living in Manaus in the Amazon, and I love her work. She has been a huge influence for me when I make work in the studio, when I'm thinking a lot about figures. The way that Maria Martins create these forms. The way that all these artists, and including Sandra, deal with fiction and fantasy. Again, I'm not a big fan of the mystical part, but I'm really big fan of artists having some sort of speculative histories. And if that is mythology, good. If that is like lies and fabulations and conspiracies, also good, right? I feel that the role of fiction in art is really, it's kind of giving human shape to the world, right? I think we take it for granted that everything, because everything that we made it for us, but everything else needs to be anthropomorphized so we can understand it. But I think it is with kind of disregard that like the stories we tell is not to make them true, it's just actually to make other things feel real, right? So like that is the role of this mythology, fiction, and everything else. Is not sometimes, I mean, there is areas of studies of the scene itself, but if they're not applicable to like moral, political emotions, they're almost worthless. So it's very complicated sometimes about like what is real, what is truth when something is not applicable to your real life or to real feelings and to real thoughts, and become again. And that is Cecilia Vicuña, Chilean artist, lives in New York. You know, we work with the same gallery in Chile, but I just recently met her through like a mutual friend in New York, and it's a super sweet person. And the performance, she's better known for the tactile works, but if right now you go to I forgot the name of the gallery in Columbia at the university, there is a show by Lotte Rosenfeld where she collaborated. Lotte Rosenfeld is a just really amazing Chilean artist too during the dictatorship, and she collaborated in a lot of performances with Cecilia Vicuña. This is one of the installations. Again, you feel the same kind of vibes and gestures in the space and in the colors and the qualities and the things that you can see in all this kind of like the rhythm of the use of a space. And again, it's also very similar mise-en-scène that Sandra had at the show at the Venice Biennial that Candace was next to it. And, you know, this was very, very, this like kind of like hexagon that you can enter. And again, the idea of the immigrant and the paperwork is better expressed in Eugenio Dittborn's work. I also have I went to school and in a time where Eugenio taught at University of Chile. So, you know, I got to see him screen print and work and think. And his daughter was in my year of my class, so I get a lot of the gossip and the thoughts. And it's very interesting to watch him work and this necessity of kind of trafficking work and be able to escape with the work was very meaningful to me. And the way that he uses screen printing and magazines and newspapers and just kind of play with something that become iconic in the collective consciousness is very important. He usually present the work with the envelopes that he used to ship around the world. And drawings and the mark making and the folding is super present in the work, and I really love that. Present them, and again, the drawing, the craft paper, the simple line is something that you also see a lot in Sandra's work. And again, escaping dictatorship and thinking a lot about how to make art. I go back and forth in the last couple of days thinking a lot about Sandra's work, thinking about a person that left Chile during the 1989 or 1990, right as the country was transitioning into democracy. And sometimes this kind of mythology and search for this kind of like mystical traditions can be a very good way to subvert the political environment. Sometimes it's not necessary subvert everything, right? So it's a complicated relationship with. I mean, again, it's not talking shit, but like. To me, it also with Sandra has a problem with class too, right? It's like, but it's just because I'm like sore about like, there is something about the interest in mythology and escaping political context that is useful and healthy, but also it is because you come from a different class and you are afforded those qualities and you are afforded that access. So yeah, again, to leave Chile and go to study in Germany and to have access to all these kind of like war cultures and go to an Italian school for high school and have access to the stuff and then go to study under Cunellis, which I'm jealous of all that stuff. I'm incredibly jealous. I want to study under Janis Cunellis right now, right? I want to study, it's like fighting Catholicism and moving into Buddhism as she did, mostly because her dad took her to Japan or something like that, right? It's like it has a lot to do with access and the quality that you have, you know. Again, doesn't take merit of the work, but to me, sometimes entering the consciousness of the work has the difficulty because I'm think about privilege a lot, and I think a lot about like, why are you escaping, right? If it's like sometimes it is escapism and mythology is very healthy when the oppressor is just in your face. And sometimes it's because you didn't want to talk about it. So it's a complicated relationship, right? You see the way that she uses also a negative space and the figure and the absence of information, and the way that she makes sculptures with the paper, it reminds you a lot of Velke Sayon, a Cuban printmaker that is super young. The way she addresses religion and the absence of the figure is very present. I really, really love the way that in the case of Velke Sayon, she does it with holograms, like this technique that is kind of like very simple, like cardboard cutouts, and you can paste them together and build this kind of shell and then press it. So the indentation or the emboss of the work is very beautiful. And in the same way that the beauty of these drawings are so eerie in Sandra's case because of the beeswax emboss in some way, and they give this like deftness that make the drawings almost feel like a tattoo on the page. And I think I really love that simple gesture. I think they are very powerful in that way, that the line it feels so embedded into the paper, and yeah, it's such a simple, good move. And again, another artist that work in sheets of paper and kind of like collages. So by now we have seen like 5 artists that all immigrants working in conditions where you may have to come back home or you may have to leave home, but working in this like kind of like sequence and be able to scale up, right? I mean, again, this precariousness, this precarious notion of the paper and the print ink and the commercially available sheet doesn't really have to condition the scale of your imagination. So I love that about Sandra's work. I love that about like Eugenio Dittborn's work and about Velke Sayon's work. This presentation at the Reina, the first time I saw the work in person was at the Fowler Museum, which is like, I think is one of the best museums in LA. They do incredible work, and mostly because the installers and not having a lot of money have a lot of freedom. So I think that they do very, very good job. But this installation specifically was at the Reina Sofia in Madrid. So I mean, sometimes when you see, now I got you through it and some kind of footnotes for her work. Sometimes when you see my work, the references are not super immediate, right? When you are looking at the pieces I made for these weapons, this show I did at BRIC, actually Max helped me a lot for this. And again, these are made with time cards, the cards that you use to check into work. And the screen print is made in 4 sections, I think. So we make the objects, photograph them, and then glue every time card into the canvas, make the marks. This is installation at Patricia Reddy, the same gallery that shows Cecilia. But so all these individually time cards glue deep into matte medium, and then mark, and then screen printed with white ink. So I spray the whole piece with kind of like 70% black, and then I print the negative. And then with that, the transparency, the black, you see through the cards, right? I wanted to make them feel like ghost images, and that is installation at BRIC. This piece are around like 60 by 96 or something like that. And again, the photos are thinking a lot about these references that they are constantly present in my work, but also like, again, now you see one of the figures as Wilfredo Lamb, or you see the vibes that Roberto Mata can have. But also I was doing this residency at the Smithsonian where I was making all these archival images from early labor union movements. So when you see these kind of works, it's not immediately recognizable, but there are these photos present, and there are these photos present in my head making the work. And I think I come back, I mean, because this is not necessarily about my work, but there is this piece, a mocha, right? You have seen the Capricorn by Max Ernst, that I have tried to rip it off for like 4 different projects. It's crazy, and it never comes out good. Like, it's just bad. Like, I lie that I suck at it, but I love Max Ernst so much. There is a Max Ernst museum in this tiny part in Germany and Belgium, maybe. And I've been sucking up to the curator for like 5 years straight. Like, I just want to have access to the archives, and I just wanted to like do a show even in the corner. But I love him so much. I love the painting. I love the. Okay, so I will show you, for example. Okay. For example, okay, that one. See, Max Ernst. You know, now you see it. Okay, that one. You know, like, okay, that one. You know, it's kind of like, all right, yeah, like, yeah. No, that one is not a bit. I made another one that is very, very similar. That again, I was thinking about that, and I think I way too much, and it's not healthy. But I love Max Ernst so much, and again, to come back to, like, it's not only Max Ernst surrealist. I think there is something about making work inspired by these in-between war movements that Dada surrealism has a lot to offer, not as a, like, things that artists do because they're so creative. It's actually the desperation of not knowing if the war gonna end because, you know, all your friends went to war, and, you know, so thinking about the way that Sandra, the context that Sandra was thinking and escaping, you know, I think a lot about the way that modernism came to Latin America, and with modernism in the 50s and 60s became this Trojan horse of imperialism, and the way that, like, everything could be some sort of camouflage within this aesthetic of power and cleanliness and creativity. This is Oscar Niemeyer in Brasilia. That is Gonzalo Fonseca in Uruguay. You know, but I also took a lot of inspiration for this project I'm going to show you now from, you know, Maspo, this Schnitzer. No, this is in Frankfurt. You know, brutalism, Aztec stuff. So I started making all these this kind of like little monuments to kind of brutalist monsters confined into this kind of prison. And later I made them as a photogravures, which is this very old reproduction technique with, you know, etching copper and printing it in copper, which is like, you know, Chile is one of the biggest exporters of copper in the world, so it's a big part of their natural resources, the copper. Also, I like this kind of handmade Photoshop that happen when you like clean the pieces, and how the prints have this like weight in the material, and then I really wanted to make people feel that there is also a weight on the stop in the way you step onto the space, and really think a lot about that you're looking at work, like very aware. Again, it's hard to say, like I don't really like the aboutness or the straightforwardness of the work is very rarely there, but I think building the situations where you have to think about the work and you have to look at it in a particular way is important. So having these ceramics embedded in the floor and just a little gesture of looking down in a gallery, I think it was like was interesting to me. And there's a cohesiveness in the aesthetic that I've been pursuing for a while. But I would show you more before, because that is stuff that people make in Chile when they want to protest. So you can make your own homemade masks. But to end with this connections with like Chile, one of the reasons that something that happened while she was in there, it was this thing in the 60s, Operation Condor. That was basically the CIA orchestrated this network of like education system in something called the School of the Americas in Panama, and also I think it's called Fort Benning now in Georgia. Well, they rebranded as the Center for Cooperation in the South Hemisphere or something like that. Well, it's bullshit when people name something so nice, right? It's like it's kind of incredible about this sign. It's kind of incredible the way that America names things. It's super cool. Like no one ever invoke American values when they're about to do something nice. No one says something nice and they say free speech. Like, when like no one open the door or do something nice when they say it's a free country. Like it is. So all these names, the Patriot Act or all this stuff are like always with the name and the adjectives. You have to be incredibly suspicious. But Operation Condor happened, and so I grew up. I was like 10 or 11 when finally we got a democratically elected president. But during that time, when I was a kid, it was very popular going to protest, and these are called cacerolazos. People, for the food shortages, you go and hit the fry pans. But during the research, because I was teaching this class at UCLA about the history of punk in Latin America, I was thinking about the context where Chilean music in the 80s and, the art collectives came to be. I always thinking about all these protests, and I have so many images of protests and I didn't know what to make. And then I have also all these images of punk concerts, and so eventually I was more interested in the hands, the gestures that people would do, the way that people would hold fry pans, and the way that people do in concerts, like with that hand, right? Mostly because, again, this is where the role of imagination is so important, right? Because they can save you, they can really activate part of your brain, and they can really help you to escape situations. And that is called art. And then we go to museums and places of art, and you require a certain level of connoisseurship to understand those things. So most of the time you kind of feel left out of museums, but I encounter that when I go to natural history museums or like science museum, natural history museums, I'm fascinated by the bones, by the way that things hold the bones. I'm really like you can feel that you want to know more. There is other museum, like the Museum of Jurassic Technology is incredible too, because you can see how somebody could think of that. And it's creative, and it flips your understanding of the world. And it's like, that is enough. It's like a twist. And So I was thinking like maybe we should make there is no museum for like gestures, like, and gestures and mostly grotesque or insults have this amazing quality of being the perfect amalgamation of a time, class, and geography that is very particular, right? Like, there is no doubt that you're fighting with an Italian guy, that you're doing like that, right? Like, there is no doubt that if you grew up in the 90s, if you do that thing, right? Like, it's like all this stuff are so time, class specific, and then you know it, but you know, NTV stopped playing now. And our kids, if you have one, like they will not know what this means. You know what I mean? No one will do this. So we need to have a museum for those kind of like things that came natural to us to make, and there is no way to archive them besides photos. And then again, photos are complicated because they belong to either a newspaper or a national archives or somebody, you know. So I started making this this kind of like something that could look like a museum, like a natural history museum of like things that resemble those gestures that could be like, what is it? Oh, is it some balls? Is like, you know. So I started making these things. I was thinking a lot about the museum at night, kind of how to, you know, break into this museum and take pictures of these shapes and figures. But you know, it's so, again, it's so abstract, but also so coded. I just wanted to make it really beautiful so we could, you know, at least trying to figure out what it means. And I think some connection would lead you to it. That is installation in Vienna with all the sequence. And then I was like, I need more. This makes no sense. Stupid project. It's like, I mean, mostly because, you know, I mean, whoever, whatever. Like, maybe if somebody wanted them, like, I could be like, this is amazing, but like, no one wants them. So, like, you know, just a sellout poser, you know. And I just want. So I really like them, but it truly like. So I started making the ceramics pieces. That again, all these non-verbal communication systems, like gestures. This is more directly gestures, but straight up insults, like, and decorated like people think art supposed to look like, right? And sometimes it's Morse code, sometimes punk bands, sometimes something that could resemble some pictograms, whatever is like the thing, almost like giving the whole smell of high art, but just a bunch of like obscene gestures. I really like working with this, and eventually you like. And then I went with Max to New York, and we installed this thing where like I only picked two of the pieces that I really like from the installation, from the photos, and I set up like 7 or 8. There is the ceramics behind those photos too, and they were displayed almost like. And again, this is where the fantasy or the fiction, right? I just wanted to make this like something that could feel like a black lab, like a black laboratory. Thinking about also that Chile during the 70s and 80s was like a laboratory for a lot of economic ideas that, you know, Milton Friedman wanted to experiment, and, you know, Chile was happy to send Joan, economist, to Chicago to study under them and get really good at neoliberalism, and in some way it works. I mean, you know, you wanted to know it's a pretty stable country, you know, just as racist as USA, you know, just as expensive as USA. It's almost like has like all the problems of USA and none of the benefits. Like it's kind of incredible. That is one of the reasons I never want to go back. But yeah, I wanted to display them like they were objects in a museum or in a lab, and having this tiles. I think I'm gonna leave it there because this is a project I did about my hometown. This is where I grew up. This is a neighborhood where like all the kind of cop. My dad is a mailman, and I grew up in this building where everybody was a cop kid, a fireman, a mailman. So all kind of like low-level state employees grew up there. So it was quite interesting. It was really nice. You know, the big building is where the detective kids lived, and those guys were assholes. They were like all that because but all the other ones were cops, post office members, and all this stuff. So it was very interesting. Kind of grew up in this kind of like super chaotic, noisy stuff. There was this project in Chile called Have a House, which is like after the earthquake, people didn't have enough money to build a house, so the architect built this proposal for half of the house and then could give you instructions to build the rest of the house. Then I made this project in the park, kind of the layout of my house, and kind of like also talking about how there is not a lot of low income or government house in USA, and this like idea the startup house or kind of helping people up is not really present. So, and the community you build around it. So I just wanted to build like kind of get people to feel like, kind of like at least feel the square footage. Okay, so because time is flying, we're gonna just move to the other room. And I mean, I set the context for Sandra's work, what I'm thinking, how I have taken some of the similar influences that I see in her work, in my work, and so hopefully you can ask me something that doesn't need me to be an expert on Sandra, but also about how we can read better this work or how we can go home with a different understanding. So, yeah, let's go over there and take a look. Again, because I really love this piece, so I also want to start here. I think it's like the way to think about drawing, and also the reverse drawing, I think is my favorite. Again, the way that the non-linear, kind of non-hierarchical association of the drawings is so present for me that is great. Breaking down those drawings, kind of like modular drawing is very interesting to me, but maybe I wanted to start with questions so I have something to go off, because I feel I talk for like an hour about random stuff. Candace, funny to you. We didn't prepare anything. The microphone.
I think through my question as I ask it, but it was interesting to hear you maybe categorize the idea of the mythological as escapist and kind of a class-based privilege, if I understood your critique right. Because I actually think your work has a lot of mythological qualities, but it's also about class. And I guess there was something in the last work you showed around the gesture in ceramic, almost like a fossil, like the body becomes, and the gesture becomes like a fossil. And there's something in her work about the body and geology and volcanoes that I think in her work is maybe related to, or as I interpret it, is related to like landscapes that get excavated and a similar gendered critique. But I'm wondering, can you respond to that?
Yeah, I can elaborate. First, yes, I think there is a lot of flaw on my critique. In the same way that sometimes I feel that way and sometimes not. I do believe in some sort of like mystical qualities of all words should have, right? Because you are after all, it's a problem with like, people think about religion, but not thinking about when people hate religion, usually are thinking about like hating the Catholic Church or the institution, but not really considering how much is the closest thing that the working class has for a morality of life, a guidance, right? Like, so it's interesting to think you have to almost be there or know the artist or know something about the artist or kind of smell it in the artist to know when they are thinking about mythology in this way to like overcome something, or they are just actually fetishizing some sort of culture and selling the idea of the mystical Latino as a the noble savage, and this idea that like because you walk around with a poncho, it's like, so sometimes I'm very suspicious of that, but I'm suspicious with everybody. I'm suspicious with, I'm very close friends with Guadalupe, and like sometimes I get annoyed, but I just annoyed. Like that like I'm too cynical to engage with that, but it works for him and it works for the work, and he makes really amazing work because of that. And sometimes, in the same way that there is the same way that thinking about punk aesthetic is like you still can have a 9 to 5 or be a rich guy that believes, So it's only depend which day I wake up. I feel that rich people cannot be punk, and sometimes people can be punk by buying some companies that they disrupt some markets. I'm very flexible about how much I hate those things. So like, and there are gonna be times where like the flaw, my argument can have a lot of flaws, but I do think there is a surge in her, and I think the part about the title that I'm very, very interested, maybe because I'm a photographer, is to think about the volcano as this kind of icon of imminence, as an icon of like potentiality. Something may happen, and almost people live around volcanoes as a kind of almost waiting for the tragedy or praying for the tragedy not happen. So it gives you some beliefs. Like the more you pray, hopefully nothing gonna happen, or when it happens, it's respond to something, right? You use it to land your beliefs and to your ideas of the world. So it's interesting because as a photographer, you have the same mentality with the latent image, right? You take a picture, and 100% of the photos are fucking great until you develop. But if you never develop them, they're all amazing. And you could tell amazing stories about the pictures that you take, right? And right now, because we have this overload of information where everything is possible, where you can detect volcano eruptions, but also you can take 1 million pictures, I feel those moves are more necessary than ever. Like we should have more imminent moments and more latency in images, like waiting for something better to happen, or waiting for like leaving this like unknown as present in our lives. So I really like the text. I really like the ideas behind it. Sometimes, again, there's a problem with knowing sometimes about artists, and sometimes like it's unfair of me thinking that because they come from money, they cannot have this mystical quality. But also sometimes you are like, you went to Brazil once, why you are making work about the Amazon? Sometimes it's annoying, and sometimes it's cool. But the quality of the work, sometimes hold it. And if this shit is amazing, sometimes you're like, okay, I forgive you, because it's good. Like what happened with Guadalupe, or what happened with these pieces. But some other times I'm like, the one drawing, I'm like, is it? Right? So the mysticism quality is not that I dismiss it. It's just sometimes I'm suspicious, and I think it's healthy for me. But I like to know when it happens, right? Like I went to this the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, and there were these like little figurines of deformed people, and I was reading that like when people had like problems, birth defects, or or any sort of like problem, they made the miniatures because their difference made them closer to God. So they were only the people that were destined to be reserved as a figure, right? So it's interesting when you kind of help some mythological qualities or some deist behavior get you to actually preserve something that actually is important to your culture. Sometimes, mostly, artists doing their career mostly in Europe. I'm suspicious. Doesn't mean anything. Yeah. There's a microphone behind you. Watch out.
So you talked a lot about precedents from other artists prior to her and kind of the way that they're working, the kind of style of images. But you didn't talk that much about text except for the first part of your presentation with the poets. And there's a number of her works that incorporate text, and I'm wondering just your comments on that or what you think of her use of text and what the precedence for that is.
Let me see. For example, again, this is the problem with the apophenia component I was saying, like reading a lot and making connections and try to sometimes, I'm also suspicious or outsmart the maker or outsmart myself with thinking that something is more interesting than it is supposed to be, and sometimes can have profound meanings, and I don't know, I particularly don't like it, not only in this work, in a lot of works, right? Sometimes the text can operate as a diptych of the image. Sometimes I feel most, like 80% of the time, I feel that is building an excuse for the text, for the image to exist, right? Because I mean, again, because I always wanted to be a filmmaker, and I would love to write more. I study philosophy. I love reading, and if I could write well, I could be a writer. It could be so much cheaper. I could save so much energy just writing and creating words. Like there is this like amazing Chilean writer called Benjamin Lavateur that is highly recommendable. Like he wrote this text called "When We Cease to Understand the War." That is incredible book and well researched, and he used research as a creative departure, right? But why I'm not kind of addressing directly the text is because like as a Chilean I get annoyed at the like, for example, that word behind you, y este mar que tranquilo nos baña, that is just a line from the Chilean anthem. So I don't care. You know what I mean? That's a line that I grew up singing in high school, making like in elementary school, and that is a verse that we repeat. So as a Chilean, I don't care that much. And I prefer to fantasize with other stuff that actually came from her imagination, right? Like, I mean, there is a lot of work that I didn't show images, but there's also this Colombian movie called The Embrace of the Serpent that is perfect. It's a perfect movie, and it's about the search of Germans or colonizers come and search for the el caucho, like as how you say it? The rubber. Yeah, the rubber in the trees, right? And then they also find this kind of magical plant, and then with that come the Jesuits, and then they evangelize everybody, and they become crazy, and they get really high with this plant, and then the people took over the whole Amazon in Colombia, right? It's an amazing movie. Please watch it. It's like El abrazo de la serpiente. So I'm more interested in images like that, where there is there is this feel clear relationship with somebody, like from Maria Martins to Dorothea Carrington. They belong to a consciousness of a women surrealist that is very rich and is very beautiful, and I want those stories, and I prefer to fantasize with the stories, right? When I read when the one text is about the Chilean anthem, like it's again, I don't know, maybe people are, but if I write a piece in God We Trust because it's in the dollar, like what I was write, if I write some one-liner that is very popular in American consciousness, you could be like, yeah, we all say that, or whatever. Like, so it could be to me as a Chilean person, it rents irrelevant because I just have heard everything. It's like it's a very kind of like obvious political move. So like using the anthem to name something, and mostly some particular part, almost as a traumatical thing. It's just not that interesting to me. So that's why I kind of overseen, because the statements feels like the imagination that the drawings have, the writing doesn't have it. It's very direct, and I don't think it's creating friction enough for me between the writing and the imagery. But I think the sculptural qualities of this images and the blipping and the dislocation of certain words, I think is really, really creative. And I really love the encaustic quality and the protection and kind of building this kind of like, and again, it's really interesting what happened. I mean, you have the use of like beeswax in a lot of artists, but it's interesting when it's like, when you are using it to like protect something or to emboss, from Jasper Jones to Joseph Beuys, and a lot of like the performance of covering something and protecting it, I think is interesting. And I think there is, and it truly makes them feel like almost like tattoos. And I think the depthness of the drawing is very interesting in that. But yeah, but I don't know, there is maybe a person that is good at writing, interested in writing. Yeah, I also, I recognize that, it's on, yeah, it's hard to think about who does text very well. But there is, if you can think of somebody that can do it, it's complicated, because also I feel that I don't like the idea of the translation, direct translation of something, right? I prefer the badly translated poems, the badly translated things, the things that you misunderstand to make more art, than actually like literal translation. And again, it's for somebody that has been translating a lot of things in my head, I prefer to fantasize about the mistranslation, right? And I think there is some possibilities in the way that creationism is making it, right? For example, I wrote a little short text about this, but I'm gonna like give you the, right? As a Spanish speaker, I always made the mistake to say I took a decision, because in Spanish it's tomar decisiones. So when I think about tomar decisiones, I translate it as I took a decision, which has so much to do with the level of how I use class to translate things, right? Because in English you say I made decisions, right? As a person that grew up poor, I feel that decisions are just options that are given to me. So I don't get to make decisions. I don't get to go home and think about it and decide what I want, what is the best for me. I have to wait until somebody give me options. So I'm always waiting for somebody to present something to me so I can take them. So from my position, the translation, the ideal translation is a mistranslation, because I can only take decisions, right? So when you translate to what it means to take, or how you make tomar is to grab, is to grasp, or to grab, or to take, is like a shot, right? So all these kind of qualities that take has in all their etymological levels, that always have this level of immediacy, that you can get to meditate on it, that this opportunity may be presented only once to you. And that's why I have chosen bad translations into things. And that's why sometimes the language in these pieces doesn't feel as robust, because it's not misleading enough for me. But for me, camera, I don't hate this work. Don't forget. Because again, that is the thing. Sometimes, not because it's gonna be recorded, and Amanda and Annie gonna be mad, is whatever. It's like, the main thing is like, if you can think about something, with something, about something, around something, is much better than love it and then move on. But the idea that you can have a problem with something and still want to talk about it is almost, in the arts, it's a very complicated relationship, right? Because it's partisan. Sorry, this is like we rant, but like, because with art and ideas, people act like teenagers with their favorite band. You know what I mean? Like, that's why you hate the band when they change style so much, because you model all your sense of being after that band or after that record, and as soon as they switch, it feels like a betrayal, right? So anybody that doesn't believe the same things that you believe when you are your favorite artist, your favorite text, because you have built so much of identity around that thing that not liking it is not allowed. Or having a problem is not allowed. Having a flaw is not allowed, right? So it has mostly to do with this true democracy into beliefs of something, right? It's like creating enough friction to arrive to some conclusions, not to just fall into place by no reason, just because your dad also was that. Or you grew up in the side of town that also believes that, you know? One more question and then we go, because there's a whole cheese of plates waiting for me. No more? That's great, okay. Yes, Candace, please.
So one thing I am thinking about when I look at Sandra's work is that there's a lot of backs and front and back that don't mirror each other, inside and outside. Even the idea of the volcano is like what you said, like this latent potential of something that you can't quite see that is inside and held in. And so I think I think it'd be interesting to hear you talk as like primarily working in sculpture and photography. There's always this relationship of indexing, right? Like you make a lot of sculptures that you then photograph and then maybe print as etchings. What do you think about what's happening about this kind of something that references something that's not necessarily a reference to the real thing?
It's a good question, because we have to go so deep in history to, I guess this, okay, this is going to be very nerdy and I'm going to try to make it very quick, okay? I understand what you say about the duplicity of the sculptures, and I thought, right, I like it because it's something I would not make or think, because I do need the vantage point, because I'm not a good sculptor, and I like to set up these places so we can think about it. So in a lot of my work, and my sculptures are actively against that kind of decisive moment or the fleeting moment, right? I'm really against immediate thoughts as a way to think that something is real because it's immediate, right? So this requires you to go around, and the first impression is also can be the last one, but also there is going to be 4 or 5 angles for a drawing, which is fascinating, right? The part that I am more interested in a lot of the drawings, that in Egypt, in the history of Egyptian art, there was this thing called MAT, M-A-A-T, and it was a state of the art and a state of the gods, of have divinity and also being in, also have the quality of duplicity and ubiquities, being in one place. So, right, so because the god, the Ra, was in Mat, they have to show everything. The purity of the representation was part of these traditions of believing on purity. And where a lot of this will resonate with this kind of consciousness I have about the kind of some part of the historical canon, is that a lot of the figures are showing the 2 arms, the 2 legs. They are not hiding much. For in the flat drawings, there is not a lot of hiding. There is not a lot of concealment of actions. There is no one hand doing something, a sketch in the back. They are actually all the body parts and everything is being shown, right? And I don't know her level of skills or their level of training, but I really like that they engage with a history of representation that wink at that part of history in my mind, in the way where stories are told to multiple times with the same character, because they're searching for this kind of proximity to God, and this proximity to God, you can only achieve it through not hiding anything, through purity. And I think a lot of these images goes towards that history of representation. And that, I mean, I could break down more this idea of Mat and the different periods in Egyptian art, but again, it's incredibly long. But Google it, M-A-A-T, it's a very good story of like how God and power and aesthetics gets to be big interpretation of some art. But yeah, thank you, Candace.
Okay, so
Thank you.
yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. A round of applause.
Bye bye.